on watching us on streaming, welcome also. We're excited this morning that the Stewardship Committee has put together a program which we think is very helpful, particularly for our congregation. And it's going to focus on two things. One, investments and investment strategy and information. And then on aging, which, our congregation is young at heart, but sometimes we're a little older in years. And I think the information on both scores will be quite helpful. With us this morning, I'm happy to introduce Brent Darling, who's right over here, if you're looking at him. He's going to be talking on the aging component. And then on the investment side is Kyle Mitchell, who's right behind me. Full disclosure, Kyle is Jones and my investment advisor, and we wouldn't have asked him if we didn't think he was good. And I've talked with Brent Lesberger. That's an inside joke, Brent Darling. And I'm really excited to hear his information too. So we're going to first start with Kyle. He's going to go over a little information on investing. Then we'll turn to Brent. And at the end of the time, for individuals that have questions to come up and talk with either of them, we'll have a few minutes for that also. So with no further ado, let's get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Walt. Good morning, everybody. Thank you again so much for having me. I'm going to try to do something that has eluded me for many, many years, and that is multitasking with holding the microphone and trying to use my left and right hand simultaneously. So a little bit of grace if things do not go quite as smoothly as anticipated from there. I was I use that from there. So as Walt had mentioned, my name is Kyle Mitchell. I am a financial planner based out of Wilmington. Been helping families ultimately for about 20 years to organize, build, protect, and tax efficiently distribute wealth. And there's a lot of components to that. Certainly won't be able to cover all of them today, but I did want to talk a little bit about that plan and a little bit about some investment strategies that may be appropriate in today's world. So as we kind of look through ultimately what a real financial plan should look like. A lot of times investments show up as the forefront because that's in the news. We hear that, we get it on our phones. We hear that all the time. And while portfolio and investment allocation is a super important part of building and transferring wealth, having a plan to do so provides that confidence that you can accomplish what you've saved and sacrificed that wealth for. So when we look at the really important parts of your investment strategy is unique to you. There is no one size fits all. It is a matter of what's important to you, your goals, your acceptance of risk, and how do you generate the wealth you've created to accomplish all of those things. And I bring that up to simply say that everybody has opinions, and it's up to you to decide how that impacts your planning from there. So if you look at your risk tolerance and you look at the things that matter there, when we talk about in the investment component as part of it, there are certainly ways that you can look at how to invest your dollars. So this kind of jelly bean chart here, ultimately for conversation, is the return of any particular investment category, whether it's fixed income or international or dividend stocks or the soup du jour of all the different things that there are. This is simply those things put in order over the last 20 years. The reason I bring that up is just to kind of highlight that what you may see as the best place to be, and where everyone may say, well, why didn't I have all of it? Why didn't I put all my money into that if that was the best place to be? Because as we look back, whatever was the best place to be has also been the absolute worst place to be. And if anyone in this room or listening at home can tell me which one of these dots will be at the top of 2026, I am all ears, and I will gladly meet you as soon as this is over from here that would change our conversation. But without knowing what order every different type of investment, from stocks to CDs to fixed products or international, what order they go in, it's important to have the dollars you have allocated for the long term and the short term in the appropriate bucket. So how much of your investment dollars fall into each one of these buckets goes back to your individual appetite for risk. Each one of these have higher returns, higher risk, lower returns, lower risk. So it's appropriate to have some exposure to all of that. They all have a purpose. It's important to determine how much needs to be put for what purpose. I bring that up to say that we really can't spend a dollar but one time. And so if you have a dollar that's allocated for one purpose, that may be a completely different bucket than a dollar you may have allocated or designed for a different purpose. And knowing the difference is probably one of the biggest pitfalls that I've found in the last 20 years of doing this, is sometimes trying to spend that dollar more than once, or not being able to spend that dollar at all because we didn't have it in a place where it was going to accomplish what you had set out for it to do. So again, just bring that up to be very mindful that as these investments, things rotate, it's important to have a plan to evaluate and adjust and adapt and evolve accordingly. Set it and forget it may have worked for many moons some time ago, but as the pace in which the markets and interest rates change today, it's more important than ever to consistently evaluate and have a disciplined plan to adapt to that from there. So in thinking about where portfolio and investment allocations fall into that part of it, a lot of it also goes back to interest rates. Interest rates, if you've been noticing recently, have been going which way? Up or down? Down, right? In the last year or so, we've seen things trickling down slower and slower and slower. It looked really good recently, a few years ago. Not as good as it has been, and probably trending more towards down than up moving forward. So again, vehicles that were appropriate last year, the year before, may not be the appropriate vehicle today. So again, why it's important to go back and look at where we stand on that side of it. So then thinking about, again, part of your planning, the other thing to consider when we look at that is going to be cash and income. So I separate cash and income necessarily from investments on that side of it, because again, every dollar has a purpose. There are dollars that need to remain in cash. There's nothing exciting about it. The returns are not great in cash, but that money has a purpose. The appropriate amount in cash in savings for emergency will allow the assets you have in the portfolio of your investments to do what they need to do. Again, allocating the dollar that you intend to spend into the bucket where it is most appropriate for that specific purpose. Okay, so we'll continue to reiterate that is a driving force of a plan regarding your personal approach. When we also think about cash and income, would be remiss if I didn't say that when we talk about investments and we talk about cash, we talk about income, there are also what may be, perhaps depending upon where you land, one of our least favorite gratuities would be on the tax side of things. We all pay our fair share, but I don't know anybody that wants to leave the IRS a tip. So being very mindful, again, of where you have your money in the buckets and how you are extracting that money. How are you liquidating? How are you unwinding the dollars that you have will determine how many of your dollars you get to keep. And so that's an integral part of the plan as well. There have been some things that have come up recently that are going to potentially impact folks in this room as they do some of their planning. And one of those things is OBBBA, and that's because I can't say big, beautiful bill without laughing a little bit internally at the name of it. But there are some provisions that were put in place starting in 2025, specifically for folks over the age of 65. So starting last year, every individual over the age of 65 is going to get an additional $6,000 deduction when you file your taxes for last year. So $6,000 per each, $12,000 per married couple of deduction against your taxes. That opens a lot of doors that may have been closed previously with how you access your wealth, whether it's in retirement accounts or capital gains from some successful investing of stocks or various other investments. You now may be able to be proactive. This particular deduction is not permanent. It sunsets at the end of 2028. So there's a small window where, again, if you're proactive and reevaluating your planning, that you can take advantage of freeing up assets to accomplish those goals and not leaving the IRS a tip on that side of it. There are a multitude of other things that apply in part of this that some may apply and some may be more appropriate than others. One of the ones that I would also bring up as we're just thinking about that is going to be the extension of tax credit for a vehicle's final assembly in the United States. So if you have bought a vehicle last year, or quite honestly, this year moving forward, you're going to be able to offset up to $10,000 of interest that you would pay for the purchase of a vehicle that was manufactured finally in the United States. So number one, a deduction. And the same side of that, if you buy a vehicle of a certain size, this rule also put in place 100% depreciation. So the ability to go forth and take more tax deductions based on just something as simple as buying a vehicle. So again, I go back to being proactive, thinking about the things that are important to you, mapping out goals, things that you want to do, that you want to accomplish with your wealth, using the current landscape to take advantage of making sure that that dollar is being utilized as efficiently as possible and that you're not leaving a tip to the IRS for things you already intended to do as we look at that. So also bring up kind of more current times. You may have, if you've turned on the news or talked to anyone specifically outside of your household maybe, there's been some news around Iran, Middle East, in addition to Venezuela, many other countries and many other things. And as a result of some of that conversation, you've seen volatility, you've seen the stock market go down more recently as opposed to going up. I bring up this chart just to put things into context when it comes to your investments. The stock market goes down 5% on average. Going back the last 100 years, it has gone down by 5%, 3 to 4 times a year. So every couple of months, we just hit a pothole, and then we keep right on cruising from there. Occasionally, that 5% turns into 10, and on average, y'all, that happens about once a year. So if I were to make a bet, are we going to see a double-digit decline in the stock market this year? At some point in time, I would say it should be expected. We should expect it every year. It doesn't mean we're going to end negative. It just means that that's a normal market cycle. Things go up and things go down. So what we're experiencing right now, although it may sound like it's been terrible, the market hasn't surpassed that 5% decline. So when we think about what your plan looks like, how much of these bigger declines you participate in, whether it's 10 or 15 or 20%, all goes back to what we talked about. How much of your money and your investments do you have allocated to the appropriate bucket? If you have all of your money in stocks and you're not comfortable losing 5, 10, 15, 20%, then that may not be the best place. So what's that balance? Where do we find that trade-off for what you're willing to do to sleep good at night also to grow your wealth to accomplish things that are important to your family moving forward from there. So be prepared for it every single year. That part's not going to go away. As the years pass, your desire to see those fluctuations may change. And if you aren't proactive about it, you run the risk that you may inevitably be taking more risk than you think. And this just goes to show, if you set something in place and just walked away from it, and you had a third of your money in something safe earning interest, 2/3 of your money in stocks, and all of a sudden you did nothing to it, now all of a sudden you have 85 or close to 90% of your money in stocks, that looks great on your statement because that number will be bigger. But it also means that when you thought you had less risk, whenever something does happen, those bigger numbers you saw go up will be bigger numbers going down. So having, a strategy and discipline to reevaluate that strategy on an ongoing basis will be one of the most important things you can do with the wealth that you have when it comes to the investment side of things. In regards to, again, one part of that just being the investment allocations is one slice of the pie of an overall plan. Goal planning, as I mentioned earlier, what that looks like, how you manage your cash and fixed income and cash flow from there to accomplish your short-term, near-term needs, using investments for your longer-term needs or even perhaps your generational needs. If you're looking to leave a legacy, what does that look like? Other components of this, as we kind of get towards things that may impact Brent's section of the conversation today, kind of think about risk. And risk, really looking at what types of risk, not just are you willing to take, but what kind of risk do you need to be prepared for? So some of those things are expected, some are unexpected. So think about things like perhaps healthcare. Are you trying to spend $1 more than once? When you look at the wealth you've created, have you siloed some of that money to prepare for the unexpected things that life may have in store for you and your family? And so again, going back to looking at from just the protection standpoint, how are you leveraging those dollars? Are you comfortable that if these events arise, that you're going to be able to focus on the thing that's most important, which would be providing for a loved one from there, and not concerned about whether or not you have the ability financially to do so? And if you are focused on, are you financially able to take care of the loved one that you're providing for? In the back of your mind, are you also thinking, well, will there be enough money to take care of me if the time should come? So thinking about having those conversations and thinking about planning from there. The last part of it I kind of go to, again, on estate and wealth transfer, making sure you have all of your ducks in a row, thinking about as you progress through life, what have you done to think about how the wealth you've accumulated goes to those that you choose for it to go to, as opposed to the default. Believe it or not, the state of North Carolina's plan is probably not going to be in your best interest. So creating and having conversation around the things that are important to you and the ones that you love, making sure that it goes the way you want to go, and not to places you don't want it to go, is critically important. There's no better time to plan than now. As we know, there's no promise for tomorrow. So as we kind of go back and think about an overall plan, looking at what that looks like from there, that's the way I approach investments and financial planning. Be happy to have conversations and take questions after this portion. With that, I would turn it over to Brent to discuss a little bit more around kind of the risk and the protections as the years progress from there.
Great, thank you. I hope everyone's doing well today. This topic means a lot to me for a lot of reasons. And the main reason is, as my dad was going through life raising kids, he wasn't expected to pass away at an early age. And unfortunately, his first year of retirement age 64, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia and passed away 8 years later. The unfortunate part was he wasn't around to really see my kids grow up, and I made it probably one of the most valiant efforts I'm going to make the rest of my career is to make sure that all the information I'm going to present to you guys today, I can get it out to as many people as possible. Because if I knew the information I'm going to present to you guys today, I feel like my dad would still be here right now. So the good news is we have moved along quite significantly in the Alzheimer's studies. So that's what today is really mostly about. As Kyle mentioned, his job is to really to help you guys build wealth, protect wealth, and then distribute it the most tax efficiently way possible. The problem is if all of a sudden health becomes an issue and you can't live, life the way you needed to live, it kind of throws a speed bump in your path to having, the life you wanted to live. And so Hartford Funds partnered up with a company called MIT Age Lab. First off, have any of y'all ever heard of MIT before? Right? Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the rocket scientist. Has anyone ever of y'all heard of Hartford before? Say, Hartford, I don't know if y'all knew this, but Hartford is the auto insurer of the AARP. And as the auto insurer of the AARP, we started seeing accident rates. This is about 20 years ago, 1998. We started seeing accident rates grow at a very, very alarming rate, okay? A very alarming rate. And as an auto insurer, there was one of two things that we needed to have happen. Either, number one, we get people as they age to quit driving, right? Which we know is not going to happen. Or, secondly, we improve the technology in the automobile to reduce accident rates. So which one do you think happened? Y'all been into an automobile, I'm sure. And if y'all have driven any new automobiles lately, is the technology not incredible? To the point where soon you're not even going to have to worry about driving the vehicle. The vehicle will drive yourself. Now, we do think as an insurance company that's still way far down the road. However, we do see that in the future of autonomous vehicles being a larger part of society. Today is not actually about autonomous vehicles, but I did want to give you a backdrop as we created a relationship with the Age Lab back in 1998. The very first thing that the Age Lab did was they set up a automobile called Miss Daisy, and it is literally the only $2 million Volkswagen Bug you'll ever see. And by the way, if you're ever in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you see a red Volkswagen Bug driving down the road with MIT on the Age Lab, get out of the way, okay? So that was the very first thing. So Hartford was the founding sponsor of this Age Lab. We then, as we created Miss Daisy, you started seeing the automobile industry really progress, and now you can see where it is today. Have y'all ever wondered where all the technology came from? It was actually derived from Miss Daisy. It started at the MIT Age Lab. As a matter of fact, if you go and look at all the members of the MIT Age Lab, it's every single auto manufacturer in the world is a member of that Age Lab. All right, and that's really they were kind of the founders of the technology that became in that, started in the vehicles. Now, fast forward about 8 years later, Hartford went back to MIT and said, hey, we've got, people are growing older, they're living longer. We really want to study what we need to know, what we can tell our advisors, customers, what they need to be thinking about as we age. And so we created some presentations. One was called Quality of Life, which had to do with 3 questions. Those 3 questions were, who's going to change your light bulb? How are you going to get an ice cream cone? And who are you going to have lunch with? Now, today, I'm not going to talk about those 3 questions, but those questions really answered a lot as we age. What do we need to be doing? So one of the most important things that we found is that our social network is very indicative of how long we will live. I'm not sure if y'all knew that or not, but it really is. And so as we were doing these presentations, we kept getting the reoccurring question, okay, what about Alzheimer's? What about dementia? And until really about 5 years ago, we had no answer. And then 5 years ago, we met this gentleman right here by the name of Dr. Mark Milstein, who wrote, "We have strong evidence that simple lifestyle interventions can dramatically improve brain health and lower the risk of disease today, tomorrow, and years to come." All right, so the focus today is we're going to talk about what we need to do to literally not get Alzheimer's if possible. Now, I get the question a lot, well, you know what? My dad had Alzheimer's, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, I'm doomed. Do y'all ever think that? Is it hereditary? Most people think that. The reality is, according to Dr. Milstein's study in the book that he wrote, only about 1 to 5% of it is actually hereditary. That number shocked me because when I first met my wife, I used the quote, "I'm here for a good time, not a long time." And that was 20 years ago, okay? And she laughed. And then if you remember, a country music song came out. But that was, I actually said that before the country music song came out. So I said they stole it from me, right? So in reality, what we really need to do is we really need to focus in on this. And Dr. Milstein does a really good job at helping us understand what we need to be thinking about. And then what, most importantly, we need to be doing with our lives as we age to make sure we avoid this, okay? Because it can be avoided. So the first thing we want to talk about is your brain's age the same as your age? All right, and you got to remember a couple things. The brain is a muscle. And just like every muscle on your body, you have got to exercise your muscle. All right, have you ever met anyone, and I heard the opening comment that you made about, yes, we're young at heart, but we're aging. Have you ever met anyone that thought they were about 90 years old and they were really 60? And have you ever met anyone that thought they were 20 years old and they were really 90 years old, right? So in actuality, when you study this, your brain's age is different than your chronological age. As a matter of fact, we did do some studies on what we call the blue zones and found that after doing autopsies of folks that were in the blue zones that lived into their 90s and 100s, their brain was actually the age 20 to 30 years younger than what their actual chronological age was, okay? So when we study that, that's one of the very most important things. These people are called super agers, okay? And if you've never seen anything on blue zones, please look up under Netflix. It's called Living to 100 Blue Zones, and there is a number of different episodes that you could watch in a number of different areas. There's 5 major areas in the world that have these blue zones. The closest one to us is probably Loma Linda, California. Also, there's one in Costa Rica, Italy, and in Mark Milstein's book, he actually tried to create his own blue zone by adapting some of the policies as these blue zone folks do. We're going to talk about that today on what they did different and do different to be able to live into their 90s and 100s, right? Because I can tell you right now, once you gain and acquire wealth, right, it's your job to spend it and to have fun with it, is it not? Okay? If you've worked your whole life to have this beautiful retirement and all of a sudden you've only lived 7 or 8 years in retirement, that's not what it was designed to do, okay? The reality is that if we can do a few things different than what we're currently doing, we could probably live a lot longer, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, there are things that come up. This isn't a guarantee. There's only 2 guarantees in life. Y'all know that, right? Death and taxes, okay? The good news is that if we learn about how to stay healthy and do the right things, hopefully we can live longer. A couple of questions we always tell folks to ask. If you're starting to think you might be losing it a little bit, here are 5 main questions. How well can I manage my day? And what we mean by how well can I manage my day, am I forgetting things I normally would not forget? Okay? And all these questions are designed around maybe if you answer no to some of them, maybe you should start see a neurologist or maybe see a doctor and figure out, okay, what's going on? Okay, I told you earlier, at 64, my dad got Alzheimer's. I now go every year to a full body scan. I'm talking It's in Atlanta, and I'm very cognizant of making sure that I continue to stay healthy because I want to watch my kids have kids and grandkids, right? So it's important to me. And there's some other things, some technology now that's out that I could talk to you about as well, and I'll mention at the end of the presentation. But the first one is how well can I manage my day? How well can I remember important information? Okay? What has happened in the last, basically since 2010 is we have offloaded, okay, every single thing that we had to remember on a daily basis from here to here. Do y'all agree? Is that a good or a bad thing? Well, somewhat's a good thing. I'll ask you a question. How many of y'all remember the very first phone number of the house you lived in when you were first growing up? Right? What's happened is if we offload everything, our brain does not try to remember anything. And that's not a good thing. Okay? So what we tell folks is every once in a while, take that grocery list, flip it over, see if you can remember what was on that list when you go in the store. Continue to maintain your brain. And I'm going to give you all some ideas and some things that you can do as well about keeping your brain healthy and keeping that muscle moving up there. All right. Next, how well can I move and maintain balance? There is a correlation. And if you've ever met anyone that had a stroke, the very first thing that goes after they've had a stroke is balance. Okay. So there is a correlation to your balance and your brain. If you're starting to see that you're, falling and losing your balance on an occasion, might be something you want to go take a look at. Next, how fast can I walk? We're not saying that if you can't walk on a treadmill at 4 miles an hour at a 5% incline that you're doomed. But what we will say is that there is a correlation between the gait of your walking ability, so the pace, and a healthy brain. And what has been a tendency is the faster you walk, the healthier your brain. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean everyone needs to walk as fast as they can, right? And some people have issues. My dad had a bad issue with knees, and he couldn't walk that fast. But what it is saying is there is that correlation. And then finally, how old do I feel? I used to use this example, God rest her soul. My mother-in-law just passed away in December, but my father-in-law would literally, he's 71 years old, and he acts like he's 25. My mother-in-law was 69 years old, and she acted like she was 120. There is a correlation. As a matter of fact, Dr. Milstein did a study in his book with two of the exact same types of people, same exact makeup of two different people, okay? And he sat them each in a room, and he gave them basically speeches. And one of the rooms was telling them that they were old. The other set of the room was telling them that they were young, and showing videos about how being young and vibrant, and then how being old. And then he put a GPS on all of the participants. There was 10 participants in each room. And they measured the gait in which they walked when they left the room. Guess what happened? The folks that were told they were younger walked at a faster pace when they left the room than the folks that they told they were older. Can you believe that? I certainly can, right? So a lot of it is, and I'm not saying a lot of it is up here, but there is a lot of it to do with that, right? So how old do I feel? Okay. I mentioned this earlier, so it's part of normal aging. Alzheimer's and dementia is not part of normal aging. Okay, it is a disease. All right, and what we need to do is to figure out how not to get that disease. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And I have relatives, I have genes. So the gist of Alzheimer's is really inside of your brain. We're going to talk about how it occurs. A byproduct, we'll start with brain trash first. Okay, does everyone know what brain trash is? So every day as your brain is working, there is electrons and neutrons that are going in your brain, making everything go, make your heart beat, making your lungs work. Everything is controlled by your brain. And brain trash occurs from those neutrons and electrons working on a daily basis, okay? There's about 5 pounds of brain trash per year that gets built up in your brain, okay? And how do you take the trash out? Well, that actually occurs at night. So what normally happens is, as the brain trash occurs every night, when you go to sleep, there are 3 phases of sleep. Okay, there is deep sleep, there is rapid eye movement sleep, and there is light sleep. So the way that it works is you first fall into light sleep. Okay, after you get into light sleep, you enter the deep sleep range, and then eventually you enter the REM range, rapid eye movement range. And what normally happens is it's a cycle. These are 90-minute cycles. So you might run through 4, 5, or 6 cycles every single night. The most important part of that cycle is the deep sleep. So as your body prepares, it lowers your temperature in your body, preparing yourself for deep sleep. And then when you hit deep sleep, I don't know if y'all know this, your brain actually shrinks by 30%. It squeezes out the toxins, and then you have fluid that comes through your spinal cord up into your brain, and it flushes it out through the waste system of your body. As you can see here, okay, a byproduct of your work is your cells, right? 5 pounds of brain trash a year, and the more buildup, the trash, the older the brain. And this is what basically a healthy versus an Alzheimer's brains look like. In a healthy brain, there are no amyloid plaques, no neurofibular tangles, and really what happened, and I can go back to what happened with my dad. My dad got very, very bad sleep, right? He never really entered deep sleep. And so the sleep was the major factor in him to getting an early onset of Alzheimer's at 64 years old. And so you really need to prioritize, and we're going to talk about 5 things we can do to make sure we live longer. But sleep is what I would say is the number one prioritization to living a longer life and a healthier life. On average, Alzheimer's lasts, it's 3 to 11 years, but the average is about 8 years. Some people can live as long as 20 years, right? And has anyone ever been affected or knows anyone that's had Alzheimer's or dementia? It's a real, it's a debilitating disease. It's hard to watch. So the goal is we're going to try to learn about what we can do to not get it. That's the key, right? So we can live as long as possible. All right. We are in a financial presentation, so I would be remiss without talking a little bit about the cost. If you look at home health care, it's about $77,000 a year. This is as of a couple years ago. Assisted living facilities are $70,000 a year. A nursing home is about $127,000 a year, or about $127,000 total throughout the lifetime. And if you add memory care, you're adding about $12,000 to $48,000 a year. So what Kyle mentioned earlier is, if we don't have long-term care, it's probably a good option. Now, I'm not here to sell long-term care insurance, nor will I ever. But I will say, as Kyle's putting plans together for you, one of the very first things we did with my mom and dad, because my grandmother actually did have Alzheimer's prior to my dad passing, is we got long-term care policies for both my mom and my dad. Now, the downside is I actually bought another policy for my mom because my sister and I were like, she's staying with you. No, she's staying with you. So we were like, we'll just buy our long-term care policy. That's a joke. But in general, so my mom is actually overfunded right now. So, again, I'm not here to sell long-term care. I'm just saying it is a solution if at some point you do get it. The downside is Medicaid does not pay for long-term care, okay? It may pay for long-term care, but you have to basically prove yourself penniless in order to be able to pay for it. Y'all know that already? So if y'all want to learn how to lose all of your money so you can get Medicaid to pay for your long-term care, right? Probably not a good solution to wealth management, right? And so we won't talk about that today. But in general, that's really the only way. So the average expense lifetime care cost for a dementia patient is somewhere around $405,000 estimate. What this does not show on here, it does not show the loss of income from the caregiver that takes care of you. Okay, that does not show that. And we all know what historically, and I will tell you this based off of working with the Age Lab as long as we have, usually the eldest daughter in the family has the responsibility of taking care of the patient that has dementia. Now that's not exactly what has to happen. That's just how we view it in the United States. That's usually what happens. Next, we'll talk a little bit about brain health in your lifestyle. Traveling, working, socializing. We all have all these plans for retirement, depending on what stage you are in retirement, whether you're at the very beginning of your retirement or you're at the very end of your retirement. The thing we have to be able to make sure that we continue to keep forefront is called mission and purpose. Okay? That's what gets you up out of the door, doing things, meeting people, and we're going to talk about the importance of meeting people and socializing here in a minute. Okay? There are 5 things at this point we're going to talk about, how not to get Alzheimer's. The very first thing I mentioned earlier, it's sleep. Okay? I mentioned how there is a 90-minute sleep cycle already. I talked a little bit about how the sleep cycle works and how your body will reduce. It will actually get the temperature in your body will go down prior to getting into deep sleep. So one of the most important things that we can do at home, and this might cause a little bit of a challenge to you guys, like it does with me, is the thermostat. Right? I'm originally a Floridian. I married a North Carolinian. I think comfortable is 81. My wife thinks comfortable is 67. All right? So when I go to sleep at night, literally, she has it set at 64 to 65 degrees in the winter and 67 in the summer. That is not my cup of tea. However, one of the very things that we can do is you should be setting your temperature at about 65 to 67 at night, because as I mentioned earlier, the very first phase of sleep is light sleep. The goal of light sleep is to reduce your body's temperature to enter deep sleep. The good news is if you're in a colder environment, you will enter deep sleep quicker because your body doesn't need the time to cool down. Y'all follow me with that? Okay, so that's one of the things. We want to make sure that we have a dark bedroom in order to do that with. So sleeping in true darkness. And I don't know if did any of y'all remember the tennis player named Pete Sampras? So Pete was famous. This was 25 years ago. Pete Sampras would carry a roll of black duct tape to every single hotel room he would ever stay at when he was on the tour. And the first thing he did when he would check in is he would put a piece of black tape over the little red light on the TV. He would put a piece of black tape up on top of the fire alarm, because there's always that little light. He would tape the drapes to the wall. He would so that way there was no light coming in. He would put a towel underneath the door. Pete had this idea that if he could sleep in true darkness, he would be much more focused on tennis the following day. Guess what? Pete was about 20 years ahead of his time, because studies show that sleeping in true darkness is one of the very best things you could possibly do for your brain. Even though our eyes are closed, your brain still takes in light. All right? And that light will affect your sleep. Second thing is, we got to make sure that we get out early when we wake up. So it's recommended, according to Dr. Milstein, that we get at least 30 minutes after we wake up, we get natural light. It has to do with your circadian clock, right? Making sure we get out the door, walk your dog. If you don't have a dog, walk someone else's dog, right? We got to make sure we get out, because it will start your circadian clock again, and it's very healthy. I will say this, your brain does like repetition. It does. A brain that has a continuous sleep process, time you go to bed, the amount of time you go to sleep, it's always recommended 7 to 9 hours. And if y'all wake up in the middle of the night and you're worried about waking up, everyone wakes up in the middle of the night. That's part of your cycle. As a matter of fact, if you look at the REM cycle and your REM sleep, okay, so that's usually after deep sleep, it's about as close as you can get to being awake, REM sleep is. That's when you're dreaming, okay? That's when all your dreams occur, is during REM sleep, and that's when you're most likely to wake up, is during REM sleep, all right? And we're going to talk about some things that we can do as well. If we do, I'll just go ahead and mention it now. So if you do wake up in the middle of the night, and this is part of another section, there are some breathing exercises that we can do, okay, if you wake up in the middle of the night, that will help you get right back to sleep. Okay, what I will say, and I'll do the breathing exercise at the end of the event here, but do not pull this out. This is the worst thing you could possibly do. Okay, what we do is when we look at your phone, we call it opening the office in my business. And the last thing you want to do is open the office at 3 a.m. in the morning when you woke up from one of your sleep cycles and you think, wait, I can't get back to sleep. Okay, do not do that. Not good for you. Okay. Next, what you are is what you eat. Do y'all know that there is a connection from your brain to your gut? I think everyone's learning that about now. Okay, we need to make sure that we eat healthy foods. Now, what type of foods that were we going to need to eat? Okay, we're going to need to eat, and I'll kind of show you here. We're going to need to eat foods that spoil, for the most part. I think what's happened over the past, I would say it's pretty much since the 1970s, is there is so much more in our food than we would ever expect that it's really not healthy. All the preservatives, all the additives. So what Dr. Milstein would say is, and if you go and you watch Blue Zones, every single ingredient that everyone is eating on a daily basis, it's all natural ingredients. Okay, and if you want to look at what not to eat, go to Chicago, the Museum of Science. And when you walk in, any of y'all ever been there? It's a museum of arts and science in Chicago. It's phenomenal. But right when you walk in there, there's a glass pane Twinkie, right, sitting literally right when you walk in there. And that Twinkie is unwrapped. And it is the most delicious looking Twinkie you'll ever see in your entire life. Okay, can anyone tell me what the shelf life of a Twinkie is? What does it say, 100 years? So the question is, what is the shelf life of a Twinkie? Folks, it's 43 years. I'm telling you right now, if you want good brain health, do not eat Twinkies. Not good for you, right? We want to literally focus in, and this really is, just to summarize it, this is very close, if not the same as a Mediterranean diet. Okay, it's healthy, whole foods, extra virgin olive oil, fish, cold water fish like salmon, herring, cod, tuna, trout, nuts, beans, fruits and vegetables, things that when you put in your refrigerator will spoil. Okay, if you have something in your refrigerator that can stay there for 2 months and then you can eat it, that's probably not good for you. Okay. Next, stress. Is stress a good thing or a bad thing? Everyone always says, well, it's a bad thing. Actually, some stress is actually a good thing, okay? And so what we will talk about is stress is it boosts happiness to manage stress, finding the right amount. What's not good stress is a couple things. Number one, carrying this on your phone, watching the stock market every day, thinking that, and I always say this, thinking that just imagine this. Imagine if all of a sudden you get on an elevator and there were 2 buttons. One said soar and one said plunge. Okay, what would be your reaction? I know my reaction. I'm not riding on this elevator. What happens when you look at this every day is you are creating undue stress for your body and your mental capacity. It is not healthy. Now, it is healthy to engage when you're texting or calling your friends and family members, doing social media, right, in the right way, but looking at your finances and arguing about politics are probably 2 of the things I will not recommend on a daily basis. Y'all follow me there? Okay? No one's ever going to win. So stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a good thing, but how we manage stress is the most important thing. And this is the breathing exercise I was going to talk to you all about. If something happens that you drive out of here today and all of a sudden, boom, you get a flat tire. All right. What's your reaction going to be? Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to say, oh my gosh, the last time this happened, what did I do? Okay. So the first thing you literally have to do is think. Okay. What did I do? Is AAA premium paid up? Okay. Who did I call? Is there a jack in the car? Can someone help me? Right. There's all this has to come and you're going to get stressed. Okay. How you handle it is very important. So what we would say is the very first thing we have to do is breathe. So that, what I was talking about earlier, when you wake up in the middle of the night, and maybe it was a nightmare that you had, and you feel real stressed out, the very first thing we need to do is breathe and do a breathing exercise. Now, when I first heard this, I said, man, this is crazy. There's no way this is going to work. And then I implemented it in my life, and it absolutely works. So what it's called is 5-2-5. So what we're going to do is we're all going to do this exercise real quick. We're going to breathe in through our nose, and we're going to breathe in relaxation, or we're going to breathe in stress. We're going to hold it for 2 seconds, and we're going to breathe out for 5 seconds out of your mouth. So you're breathing in stress, and you're blowing out relaxation. Okay? Ready? Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ready? Hold it. Breathe out. You know what we just did for you? We just lowered your blood pressure. Have any of y'all ever taken your blood pressure, and just before you take your blood pressure, you do this breathing exercise, it automatically will go down. So if you get into a stressful situation, it's always recommended via Dr. Mark Milstein that we do a breathing exercise. Second thing we need to do is we need to change our perspective. Okay? Have you ever witnessed road rage? Let's just say, for instance, we're leaving here today, okay? And all of a sudden, some maniac in a truck flies right by you, cuts you off, almost wipes you out, almost puts you out into a ditch. Okay? What is our first reaction? Normally, it's rage. Okay? You get mad. We have to train ourselves. If this happens, okay, we have to change our perspective. We have to change our perspective. Has anyone ever read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by, was it Covey? Like Dr. Covey? In that book, he writes about a situation that he was in on a train by himself, and a gentleman got on the train with his 3 kids. His kids were all under the age of 5. And he remembers looking at this gentleman who was just sitting in his seat, and his kids were going absolutely crazy. I mean, they were swinging from the banners. They're running around, chasing each other, grabbing each other. And he looks at this gentleman and said, "Sir, can you do me a favor and control your kids?" And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We just left the hospital where those kids just lost their mom." Changing perspective. When that guy cuts you off and almost runs you in the ditch, we got to think, oh my goodness gracious, we need to be saying a prayer for him. Something's probably wrong. Okay, we need to stop the rage and change our perspective. Okay, another way we can do this is what we call rose, thorn, bud. Have y'all ever heard this? So rose, thorn, bud is thinking while you're in a stressful situation, all right, what are the 3 things that have happened to me in the last 2 or 3 days that have been the rose, that have been a beautiful thing? Maybe I got a text from a grandchild, or my wife telling me that, thank you for working hard. Something. What is the 3 things that have happened to you? And then putting that forefront in your mind. It will make you focus on something good instead of something stressful. Second thing is, what are the most challenging things? What's the thorn? What's one of the challenging things that have happened to me? Okay, maybe I had to deal with, a problem at work. Maybe, there was a stressful situation that occurred. Whatever it would be, thinking about that takes your mind off about the stress you're currently dealing with. And then finally is the bud. What am I looking most forward to over the next, 3 to 6 weeks? Was there a trip coming up? Am I going to see the kids or grandkids, right? What is next? Get moving, right? So if you think about this, we've talked about sleep already. We've talked about stress already. Now we're talking about exercise. There is a correlation between your cardiovascular system and your brain, okay? Your brain takes the majority of your oxygen up. It's like 70% of your brain is absorbed, is used from your oxygen is used in your brain. Y'all realize that? So making sure our cardiovascular system is currently working at a good rate. There's one exercise we can do every single day to make sure that happens. okay? And it's recommended at least 20 to 30 minutes a day, and it's actually walking, okay? Can anyone tell me what the best exercise for your brain is? She's doing it right there. Gentlemen, I apologize in advance. It's dancing, okay? Dancing is it's probably the best exercise for your brain, because what it does is it makes your brain think about where you're stepping, who you're dealing with, reading your partner, okay? And so one of the things we do recommend is making sure we at least walk 30 minutes a day, and if you can dance, have at it, as much as you can, all right? We talk about just making and doing cues, doing certain things every day to make sure we can get that exercise in. And what these cues are, we call them cars. So a cue is basically if we know we need to go to the gym, maybe we're going to swim, maybe there's something that we need to make sure we do on a daily basis. All right, setting a cue up to make sure that it happens. One of the things I do is when I know I need to work out, I work out 3 days a week, I will take my car keys and put them in my tennis shoes. So the first thing I do when I know I need to go is those car keys are in my tennis shoes. I know I have to work out, okay? Now, if I choose not to work out, that's on me. I didn't forget about it, okay? So taking cues, action. One of the things, if we need to walk 30 minutes a day, instead of circling the parking lot for 30 minutes looking for a spot right up front, park way in the back and walk. If we need to make sure we get our steps in, don't worry about getting the closest spot, okay? And then finally, reward and support. And I just laugh at this because what this is doing things with the people that you like. And I said that beats the alternative is doing something that you hate with someone you don't like, right? So making sure we literally reward and support. So it's cars, cue, action, reward, and support to make sure that we get in all the exercise that we need to have on a daily basis, okay? Next is cross-training your brain. All right, this is something that we always need to make sure we have mission and purpose in life. And a lot of times what happens is we get stuck in the same rut. As an example, let's just say that we decided we were gonna, start to learn how to play an instrument. Okay, then we play the instrument, we play the same song over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, it's good that we learned a new instrument. It's bad that we keep doing the same thing. It's like doing a crossword puzzle. If all you ever do in life are crossword puzzles, you know what you're going to be good at? Crossword puzzles. But you know what your brain does not do? Your brain does not exercise when you do things on a continuous basis. As a matter of fact, even walking, and if you walk 10 minutes a day, it's recommended that out of those 10 minutes, at least 4 of those change the gait of your speed. Okay? So don't just walk 10 minutes. Make sure that you're changing the gait of your speed, because what that will do is that will make sure that your brain continues to exercise as you are currently exercising. So things we can do, try different physical activities, learn a new song, play a new instrument, try to do a new language, try to learn it. What we've seen happen over years, and I can tell you what one of the things I'm going to do when I do hit my retirement is I'm going to go and I'm going to take an online cooking course. I like to cook now, but I know I can be a lot better. Okay, we've always encouraged folks to do online courses to learn something new, but if you have a passion that you had maybe when you were younger, now you have the ability with all online courses that are out there to do whatever you so desire. And then the last piece of this whole presentation is about supplements. And I get this question all the time, what about supplements? And one of the events I did about 3 weeks ago, I had this lady come up to me at the end and she said, Brent, I'm taking this supplement. It's like crushed up seashells or something like that. It is, I feel more alive. I feel like my brain is more at it. And I said, well, what's the name of it? I can't remember. My point to supplements, folks, is whether you're not on social media or you're watching TV, everyone has a supplement. What we need to make sure we protect ourselves from is a lot of these supplements aren't even FDA regulated, all right? There is no magic pill. We were talking earlier, right? Is there a magic pill to not get Alzheimer's or dementia? No. As a matter of fact, 98% of any pill that's ever come out for Alzheimer's or dementia has not worked. has not worked. There is no magic pill, folks. These, what we talked about today, these are the things that we need to do, okay? And to close, what Dr. Milstein said, he said, a sharp mind into older age isn't just a bit of luck, it's within reach with most of us. So as we continue to age, we need to be cognizant of what we went over today. We need to keep sleep as a priority, number one. Number two, we need to make sure we're exercising on a continuous basis, okay? One of the things that I did not mention, and that's why I do the summary, one of the best things we can do for ourselves and our brain health is actually meet new people. Meet new people, okay? I have a trick for you as well. Has any of y'all ever met someone and then immediately forgot their name? It happens all the time. Do y'all know why that is? It's called a 7-second rule. So what it is if you can keep a name in your brain for 7 seconds, okay, you'll have a better tendency of remembering that name. So what does that mean? So what that means is you have to literally, I tell people this all the time, when you meet someone, imagine you're taking out a black Sharpie and you're gonna write their name on their forehead. Now, don't write their name on their forehead or they'll never forget you, okay? But if you can take that set, and what happens is, it's like if y'all ever hear something and say, I've got to write that down? So the reason you're doing that is because you're submitting it into short-term memory. And if you can submit that into short-term memory, okay, you'll have a better tendency of remembering it. So if you can imagine meeting someone and then writing their name on their forehead, you'll commit the 7 seconds to doing it. Therefore, you're better off. So we mentioned the two things. The third is actually meeting new people and socialization. The fourth is making sure that we're eating eating good, healthy food on a continuous basis. All right? And that's the main, when I summarize all of it, if we can do that and we can literally follow that path for the most part on a daily basis, we should be able to live a lot longer. I do know that one of my colleagues who lives down the road has had Alzheimer's now over 20 years. And when he first got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he started eating healthier, he started exercising more. So he's been able to prolong his Alzheimer's, okay? And not saying this is the answer to anything, but if we continue to do it, we do know that it has been studied, according to Dr. Milstein, that it is definitely proven to help reduce the amount of Alzheimer's you possibly can get. So with that said, that concludes my comments. Do you want to turn it back over to you?
We do have time for some questions to either of our presenters. So I think the best thing to do, if you have a question, is to ask it, and we'll get an answer for you.
I have a question. You talked about sleeping in a dark room. What about an eye mask that really blocks out the light?
The question was, we talked earlier about sleeping in a dark room, and the question was, what about an eye mask that really blacks out the light? Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, if you've ever been on a plane, I actually will carry an eye mask on a plane. Unfortunately, every time I get on a plane ride where I need to sleep, the person next to me either wants to talk to me the whole time, right? Or they're going to read the entire trip. So a lot of times that's difficult. But the answer is yes, a sleep mask is definitely recommended for sure.
Is there any research about taking naps in the afternoon, if that's good or bad?
I missed that point. So the question was, is there any research about taking naps in the afternoon? First off, I'm a huge fan of naps. Huge. So the answer is absolutely yes. What Dr. Milstein would tell you is you have to keep your naps under 40 minutes. And the reason why is you do not, has any of y'all ever woken up out of a deep sleep and were totally startled and you didn't even know where you were? Okay. That's because you entered the deep sleep zone. The deep sleep is where everything occurs. It heals your body. It processes, if you're growing, that's when you grow. Like everything healthy that can happen to your brain and your body happens during deep sleep. And if you take a nap in the afternoon, it usually takes about 40 minutes in some cases to get into deep sleep. You don't want to wake during deep sleep, because remember I mentioned earlier, what happens also during deep sleep? Your brain shrinks. You don't want to wake up, right, when your brain is at that shrinking state. So naps are definitely recommended, but you got to keep them to 20 to 30 minutes. Yes, sir.
Stewart, in high school, our football coach told us that what you need to do is before the game, you have to have a big breakfast. You want to come there and come to the ball field healthy and strong. Well, after a big breakfast, I was ready to take a nap. It's like football.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So what we would recommend, I mean, and we're finding more out about carbs and protein. What I would say is, my oldest son is actually a bodybuilder. The amount of protein that you put in your body is extremely important. So there's always a place for carbs, but before you're doing an event, protein is probably one of the things that we just have learned so much more about the health of our bodies in the last 10 years. It's amazing. But so, yes. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Kyle, what has been your experience when we talk about acceptance of risk or being comfortable with risk, how that changes over time?
It's a good question, Walt. So the question was, how does your risk change over time? So thinking about that, since everybody's risk is personal to them, regardless of the risk that you're willing to take, it's all based on time horizon, how long you have until those dollars are needed. The shorter the time, the less likely that you will recover from some of the market volatility or changes in interest rates and things we saw earlier. So the longer your time horizon, the more risk you can take. So kind of relate that to like doing the speed limit. Doing the speed limit on I-40 is different than doing the speed limit on Main Street. And if you're looking at, based on how far you have to go. So while you still may be doing the speed limit when you're 30 years old, that's going to look different than the speed limit when you are 60 years old and 70 years old. The less the distance you have to go until those funds are needed, the more conservative ultimately you need to be, regardless of what risk you want to take from there.
I certainly want to thank both Brent and Kyle for being with us today. As I mentioned at the beginning, if individuals have specific questions they want to ask either of them, I think they'll stay for a few minutes and we'll be able to do that. Of course, we'll stop the recording before that. And if you're listening this online, we'll have information in the office on how you can get in contact with either Brent or Kyle. But again, gentlemen, thank you. This was extremely helpful.